You're doing everything you were told to do. You're saving, you're working hard, and you're trying to be responsible. But what if the very thing you think is protecting your future is actually the quiet trap destroying it? There is an invisible leak in your wealth, one that feels like safety but acts like a slow poison. And today, we're going to find it before it's too late. My name is Ely, and I spend way too much time thinking about how people in the US experience money psychologically. If you're someone who earns a normal income, maybe even more than you used to, but still doesn't feel financially secure, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Because what we're about to get into is something almost nobody is talking about in a way that actually makes sense. Here's the thing. Most financial content online is about tactics. It's about which index fund to pick, what the best high-yield savings account is right now, how to flip real estate with no money down. And look, none of that is inherently wrong, but it skips over something massive. It skips over the reason why a person can go from making $42,000 a year to making $85,000 a year, literally doubling their income, and still feel like they're one emergency away from a crisis. The tactics are not the problem. The psychology underneath those tactics is the problem. And until we fix that layer, nothing else will stick. Let's start with a number. According to a survey by the American Psychological Association, money is consistently ranked as the #1 source of stress for adults in the United States. Year after year, it beats out work stress, relationship stress, health concerns, everything. And here's what makes that statistic genuinely strange. The US is one of the wealthiest nations on earth. Median household income in 2023 was around $74,000 according to the US Census Bureau. That's not poverty level by any global standard. So why is financial anxiety so widespread? Why does nearly 60% of Americans, according to Federal Reserve data, report that a $400 unexpected expense would cause them financial hardship? The answer is not that people are lazy or irresponsible. The answer is that there's a trap built into how we think about money, a trap that tightens every time our income goes up. And most people don't even know it's there. Here's what most people don't realize. The trap doesn't look like reckless spending. It doesn't announce itself with an impulsive splurge or a bad investment. It's much quieter than that. It looks like progress. It feels like progress. But it quietly moves the finish line every single time you get close to it. Let's walk through a real scenario. Imagine someone. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus is 29, lives in a mid-sized city, and earns $58,000 a year. He drives a used car, rents a one-bedroom apartment for around $1,200 a month, and he's pretty careful with money. He has about $900 in savings at any given time, contributes just enough to his 401k to get the employer match, and feels like he's doing okay, but never quite comfortable. So he grinds. He gets a promotion at 31. Now he's making $74,000. That's a $16,000 raise. Huge, right? Except within 8 months, Marcus has moved to a nicer apartment, $1,650 a month instead of $1,200. He got a slightly newer car, nothing crazy, but now there's a $380 monthly payment. He eats out more often because he works harder now and feels like he deserves it. He upgraded his gym membership. He booked a vacation he'd been putting off for years. And his savings account? It's sitting at about $1,100. He's earning $16,000 more per year, and he's saved exactly $200 more. This is not a made-up story. This is a pattern so common it has a name. Economists and behavioral psychologists call it lifestyle inflation. But I want to give it the name it actually deserves, the comfort creep. Because it doesn't feel like inflation. It doesn't feel like a mistake. Every individual upgrade Marcus made felt completely reasonable in the moment. Felt earned. That's what makes this trap so effective. It operates entirely within the logic of deserving. Now you might be thinking, okay, so people spend more when they earn more. That's not exactly a groundbreaking insight. But here's where it gets interesting. The comfort creep isn't just a spending problem. It's a threshold problem. Every time your lifestyle expands, your psychological baseline resets upward. Your brain starts treating the new lifestyle not as an upgrade, but as the floor, the new normal, which means the anxiety doesn't go away. It just reattaches to the new level. That $1,650 apartment isn't a luxury anymore. It's just where you live. And losing it becomes just as terrifying as losing the $1,200 one used to be. Psychologists have a term for this phenomenon: hedonic adaptation. It's the brain's remarkably fast ability to normalize any new condition, positive or negative. A person who wins a lottery is significantly happier for a few months, then returns almost entirely to their prior happiness baseline. The same thing happens with income. Research from Princeton University found that beyond roughly $75,000 in annual income, additional earnings had very little effect on day-to-day emotional well-being. Now, there is more recent research suggesting that number is higher than that, but the core principle holds. At some point, more money stops buying more peace of mind. And the reason is that the mind keeps moving the target. Here's the thing about that $75,000 threshold, or even if you move it up to $100,000 in today's cost of living environment. The people sitting at those income levels often still feel financially fragile. And it's not because $100,000 is not enough money. In many parts of the country, it is genuinely enough. It's because the cost structure around that income has been quietly inflated to match it. The apartment got bigger. The car got newer. The subscriptions multiplied. The grocery habits shifted. And the cushion, the actual buffer between income and disaster, stayed thin. Let's do the math on this, because math makes it real. If someone earns $80,000 a year, that's roughly $6,667 per month before taxes. After federal and state taxes, depending on the state, take-home is probably somewhere around $4,900 to $5,200 a month. Let's say $5,000 for clean math. Now let's look at a pretty typical cost structure for someone living in a mid-size American city who's doing reasonably well. Rent or mortgage, $1,700. Car payment plus insurance, $650. Groceries, $450. Health insurance and out-of-pocket costs, $350. Utilities and internet, $200. Phone, $80. Streaming subscriptions and apps, $90. Student loan payments, $300. Credit card minimum, $150. That's already $3. $970 a month in essentially fixed or near-fixed costs. And we haven't touched gas, clothing, haircuts, eating out, home goods, or the inevitable non-monthly expenses like car repairs, dental bills, or travel. What's left is usually somewhere between $500 and $700 of flexible margin. That is the actual cushion. And that's the number that determines whether an unexpected $1,200 medical bill is an inconvenience or a genuine crisis. For a huge portion of American households earning what most people would call decent money, it turns into a crisis. Now look, this is where the psychology gets really layered. Because that $1,200 medical bill doesn't just cause financial pain. It causes shame. It triggers a loop of self-blame. I make good money. I should have more saved. What is wrong with me? And that shame makes the whole thing worse, because shame tends to push people toward avoidance, toward not checking the account, not making the budget, not facing the numbers, which only tightens the trap further. A study published in the journal Science showed that financial scarcity, even temporary, situational scarcity, measurably reduces cognitive bandwidth. When people are stressed about money, they have genuinely less mental capacity available for long-term decision-making. They become more reactive, more focused on immediate relief, and less able to plan. This isn't a character flaw. It's a neurological response to perceived threat. The brain under financial stress behaves like a brain under physical threat, because to your nervous system, the two aren't that different. And here is where the trap becomes almost cruel in its design. The financial system in the United States is structured in a way that makes it very easy to spend and very hard to save. One-click purchasing, buy now, pay later at checkout. Car dealerships that sell monthly payments instead of total price. Apartment applications that require you to earn 3 times the rent, which means if the rent is affordable, there's barely any income left. Healthcare costs that are genuinely unpredictable and catastrophically variable. Student loans with 30-year shadows. The structural pressures are real. And when you layer them over the psychological pressures, comparison, identity, the need to feel like you're keeping up, you get a situation where even disciplined, hardworking people feel perpetually behind. Now you might be thinking, okay, Ely, so the system is hard, my brain works against me, and the comfort creep is real. What am I actually supposed to do about it? Because I've heard spend less than you earn 1,000 times, and it hasn't fixed anything. Fair. Let's get into something more useful. The first thing to understand is that the goal is not to eliminate lifestyle inflation entirely. That's not realistic, and it's not even desirable. If you got a raise and you moved from a dangerous neighborhood to a safer one, that's not lifestyle inflation. That's a legitimate quality of life improvement. The goal is to make the decision consciously rather than unconsciously. Because the comfort creep is sneaky precisely because it happens in the background, one reasonable choice at a time. The antidote is friction. Deliberate, self-imposed friction that forces each upgrade to be a real decision rather than a default. Here's a practical way to think about this. Financial advisor and author William Bernstein talks about a concept sometimes called saving the raise. The idea is simple. Every time your income increases, you commit to directing at least half, ideally more, of the after-tax increase directly into savings or investments before your spending ever adjusts to the new income. Not all of it. Half. That way you still get to experience an improvement in your day-to-day life, but you also capture real, lasting wealth-building momentum. If Marcus had done that with his $16,000 raise, even just saved half the after-tax increase, he'd be adding roughly $400 to $500 per month to his savings automatically. That's nearly $6,000 a year compounding forward. Over 10 years, with modest investment returns, that becomes a completely different financial picture. The second thing is what behavioral economists call a psychological safety account, though most people just call it an emergency fund. But I want to separate the function from the label for a second, because the label emergency fund makes it sound like something you set up once and forget. The psychological safety account is different. Its job is not just to cover emergencies. Its job is to change how your nervous system experiences money on a daily basis. Research consistently shows that having as little as $2,000 in liquid savings measurably reduces financial anxiety, even for people who have no other savings at all. The cushion changes the cognitive experience of every transaction. When you swipe your card, your brain runs a quiet background calculation. Can I survive a disruption right now? If the answer is yes, the transaction is just a transaction. If the answer is uncertain, even small purchases carry a low-grade anxiety tax. Building that cushion, even a small one, changes the emotional texture of spending. It makes the system feel less fragile. And that reduced anxiety, paradoxically, makes it easier to make better long-term decisions. Because remember, financial stress reduces cognitive bandwidth. Remove some of the stress, and you get some of that bandwidth back. The third piece is about identity, and this is the one most financial content completely ignores. A significant part of why people resist cutting expenses isn't just about comfort. It's about what the expenses signal about who they are. The apartment in a certain neighborhood, the car that looks a certain way, the restaurants where certain conversations happen. For a lot of Americans, spending at a particular level is tied to a very real sense of social belonging and self-respect. And when someone says, just cut your lifestyle, they're sometimes unknowingly asking that person to detach from an identity that cost a lot of psychological effort to build. This doesn't mean the identity is wrong. It means the solution has to account for it. The reframe that actually works is not, live like you're poor so you can be rich later. That reframe will fail almost every time, because it positions present sacrifice against a vague, distant reward. The reframe that works is, what kind of financial life do I actually want, and what does it require me to value? That's a different question. It's a question about what you actually care about, not what you've been conditioned to signal. And when people sit with that question honestly, a lot of spending that felt essential starts to feel optional. Not because they became more disciplined, but because they became more intentional. Here's the quiet truth underneath all of this. Financial security in the United States right now is genuinely hard. The structural pressures are real. The cost of housing, healthcare, childcare, and education has outpaced wage growth for the better part of 4 decades. That is not a personal failure. That is a documented economic reality. And anyone telling you that your financial stress is purely a behavior problem is either selling something or not paying attention. But here's what's also true. Within those real structural constraints, there is a meaningful amount of room, often more than people think, that is shaped entirely by psychology, by the comfort creep, by hedonic adaptation, by identity spending, by avoidance and shame, by not knowing what the actual numbers are. And that psychological layer is the one you have the most influence over. Not because mindset beats math, it doesn't, but because the right mindset leads to consistently better math over time. Marcus, at 31, can still turn his financial story around completely. Not by becoming a different person, not by living on rice and beans, but by understanding exactly what happened to his $16,000 raise and making a different decision with the next one. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. Once you see the comfort creep for what it is, it loses most of its power. Because it only works in the dark. It only works when every small upgrade feels like a logical, isolated choice rather than part of a pattern that's quietly moving your finish line. So here's where we land. If you walked away from this video with one thing, let it be this. The financial trap most Americans are caught in is not about being irresponsible. It is about being human in a system that is very good at capturing the money that humans earn before that money can do any real work. The trap is quiet. It is polite. It wears the face of progress. And the only way out is to name it, track it, and decide, on purpose, in advance, which upgrades are worth it and which ones are just the trap tightening its grip. This channel is not about getting rich fast. It is not about flexing. It is not about making you feel bad for how you currently live. It is about giving you a clearer picture of why the financial life you thought you'd have by now hasn't quite shown up yet, and what that actually has to do with how your brain works. If that's the kind of conversation you want more of, subscribe. Leave a comment below telling me what your version of the comfort creep looks like. I read them all. And if this video helped something click for you, share it with someone who's been working hard and still feels behind, because they probably deserve to see this too.